I pulled up to the estate just before sunset, the kind of golden hour that made the manicured hedges and marble columns shimmer like something out of a postcard. Lorraine always did know how to throw a spectacle. Her parties were polished, too polished, like everything was dipped in lacquer to hide the rot underneath. I stepped out of my car, smoothing the front of my navy dress. It was simple, elegant, safe. I'd learned that growing up. Don't draw attention, don't cause waves, blend in. But no matter how still I stood, how soft I spoke, I never quite fit. Inside, the chandelier caught every eye except mine. Guests floated between crystal flutes and shallow laughter. Lawyers in expensive suits, charity board ladies with pearls big as marbles, cousins I hadn't seen in years, all circling Lorraine like moths to a flame. One of them, a distant uncle I barely recognized, glanced at me and offered a polite smile. "Oh, you're the quiet one, aren't you?" He didn't wait for an answer. I smiled anyway. My fingers found the edge of the silver necklace at my collarbone, a small charm shaped like a key. My father gave it to me the year he died. I always wore it when I needed to keep from unraveling. Lorraine stood at the top of the staircase, glass raised, beaming like a pageant queen who'd finally won the crown. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice carrying over the crowd with ease. "As you know, this year has brought unexpected blessings. My late husband's investments have borne fruit, a $60 million inheritance." Gasps, applause. Revel, my older sister, already surrounded by guests, beamed like she'd won something herself. "And I want to share this moment of joy," Lorraine continued, "with the people who've supported me, stood by me, and helped shape this legacy." She named names, friends, attorneys, even a landscaper. But not me. My name was missing, intentionally. I felt it like a slap I'd known was coming. Still hurt, though. I sat tucked at a side table, too close to the hallway leading to the restroom. My water glass wobbled slightly as I placed it back down. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I whispered in my head, "Money can't buy class." Something Dad used to say when Lorraine lit up the dinner table with condescension. And yet, here she was, crowned and smiling, while I was seated like a forgotten employee. Ravel was now flanked by admirers, people toasting her like she'd earned a cent of it. I caught her eye for a split second. She didn't even nod. Lorraine wasn't finished. She tapped her glass again, signaling more news. "As part of this new chapter," she said, "I've made decisions to restructure our family's properties, streamlining things, setting clearer boundaries." I knew something was coming. My heart knew before my head could catch up. "I've asked Tess," Lorraine said, and this time she did say my name, clear, loud, final, "to vacate the guest house by the end of this week. It's time she built her life on her own terms." Silence. Then the faint murmurs, heads turning. Someone dropped a fork. I felt every eye on me. I didn't flinch, just sipped my water. My throat burned as I swallowed. Evicted. From my own father's house. I wasn't a child. I knew how games like these were played. But to do it here, in front of everyone, to humiliate me for sport? "It's time you learned to stand on your own, Tess." Lorraine's smile never cracked. I didn't speak. I wouldn't give her that. I stared at the centerpiece in front of me, a cluster of white roses wrapped in satin. My mind didn't wander. It tunneled. Through every moment I stayed late managing estate bills when Lorraine couldn't be bothered. Every weekend I cleaned, organized, held things together while Revel lived out of state, chasing dreams financed by our father's hard work. And now I was being discarded like a used napkin. My phone buzzed gently under the table. I slid it open, typing quickly to Petra, the only one in this house who ever asked if I'd eaten. Just 2 words. "It's done." The necklace felt like a noose. I adjusted it slightly, then let my hand drop. No tears. No scene. I stood. Slowly. Deliberately. Eyes followed me as I moved past the laughter and crystal, past faces pretending not to look. Out on the front steps, the air had cooled. I paused, pulled the necklace over my head, and gripped it in my palm. "They think I'm walking away empty-handed," I whispered. But I wasn't. She had no idea I already knew about will number 2. The night hadn't even cooled when I pulled into the gravel path behind the guest house. 14 years I'd lived there. 14 quiet years spent building someone else's kingdom with hands no one saw. And now, there were boxes, stacked like bricks on the porch, taped tight, labels written in someone else's handwriting. Petra stood in the doorway, arms folded, her eyes damp but steady. "She had me pack it up earlier this week," she said, barely above a whisper. "I didn't know she'd tell you tonight." I nodded. No anger at Petra. She was just surviving, like the rest of us. But I couldn't keep my voice from breaking. No call, no warning, just toss it all on the steps. She looked down, then slipped a small USB into my palm. "He left this with me. Said you'd know when it was time." "Dad?" I asked. Petra nodded once. "He trusted you, not her." That stuck, like a match scratching the edge of my rib cage. I didn't bother turning on the lights. Just carried one box inside, set it on the old oak desk, sat in the chair where I used to write grant proposals for Lorraine's charities she never read. I opened the box. Papers, receipts, a chipped mug with the words, "World's Okayest Daughter." I let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. Then his photo, tucked in a frame, back of the box like a forgotten memory. I placed it by the window. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, the light slid through the blinds like it didn't know what had happened. I heard the crunch of tires before I saw her. Revel. She didn't knock, just strolled across the gravel in yoga pants and a hoodie, iced coffee in hand like it was Sunday brunch. "You didn't come by the main house," she said, letting herself in. "I figured I'd check on you, see how you're adjusting." I didn't answer. She walked circles around the boxes, smirking. "I know this sucks, but honestly, Tess, it was coming. You've always been kind of temporary." I kept still. She hated that. She sipped her drink. "Anyway, Mom's rewriting her will. Everything's going to me now. Cleaner that way." There it was. I tilted my head. "All of it?" "Yep," she said, proud. "Streamlining. You get it?" I finally looked her in the eye. "You were always good at showing up when it was time to collect." Revel's face twitched. Just a bit. "Oh, come on. You were always good at being quiet. Just keep doing that." I stood up. Calm. "You should be careful walking over people, Revel. One day, they might stand up." She didn't answer, just tossed the straw wrapper onto a box and left like she'd won something. But the room felt different now. My spine did too. I sat back down, letting the silence settle, and in that stillness, a memory came. 5 years ago, Revel had been caught in some scam of a consulting business. She needed money, bad. Lorraine said no, so she came to me. "You're the stable one," she'd said, "the fixer." I drained my savings, signed the papers. Lorraine didn't thank me. Revel left the next morning for Belize. Back then, I told myself it was family, that it was what older sisters did. Now I saw it clearly. It wasn't that they couldn't see me, it's that they chose not to. That realization settled deep, not like rage, more like foundation. I opened another box. Letters, dozens, all addressed to me in my father's hand, none mailed. Petra must have saved them. Each one peeled back a layer of him I hadn't known. His doubts about Lorraine's choices, his fears for the family legacy, his hopes for me. "I trust your compass," one line read, "even if they won't." I almost took off the necklace, almost threw it in the trash, but stopped, not yet. I opened my laptop, found the email I'd saved in drafts for months. The subject line already typed, "Activate Will 2." I hit send. I didn't want peace anymore. I wanted truth. And I was ready to drag it into the light. That night, the air outside was colder, sharper. I stood by the window, watching as Lorraine's car pulled into the drive, headlights sliced through the dark. She parked, stepped out, heels clicking like nothing had changed, but this time I didn't hide. This time, I wouldn't disappear. She would see me. Morning light seeped through rain-streaked windows of the library. I stood in the threshold, boots soft on carpet, unable to breathe until my lungs caught up with my heart. The hush of the place felt wrong. So much dust, so many forgotten volumes lining the walls, silent witnesses to my family's legacy. I walked past oak shelves filled with leather spines, memories echoing in the hush. This was Dad's refuge, a place of worn chairs and quiet revelation, now left to rot. Outside, the rain tapped a steady rhythm against the windows, every drop erasing certainty. I listened to it, slowed my heartbeat to match, letting the tension build. Behind a loose panel in the shelf I'd passed a dozen times came the edge of a briefcase. Hands trembling, I pulled it free and unlatched it. The metal lid creaked like a secret released. Inside lay a sealed envelope, the words scrawled, "If Tess ever asks." The handwriting wavered, final, vulnerable. I slid the paper out, my fingers curled. Dad's hand ink in dim age. I broke the seal. The letter tore a path through my heart. He spoke of Lorraine's quiet ambitions, Revel's charm masking ambition, and how he'd drafted a second will, kept it with his legal counsel, never left it with Lorraine. He confessed his bitterness over my silence, saying, "You were the one I trusted with silence because I thought you'd know when to break it." Silence. At that line, I felt rage tip over into clarity. My quiet had been mistaken for acquiescence. The rain outside pelted harder. My mind cracked open with memories. Confessions I ignored, winks between Lorraine and Revel when they thought I wasn't watching. The seed of betrayal had been planted long ago. In tone of voice, in glances, in invitations I never received. Now I saw the architecture behind their smiles. Lorraine telling me to stay close to home, nudge me away from law school. It wasn't protection. It was subtraction. I stood amid books and shadows, the letter tremoring in my fingers. The house breathed. I eyed each shelf, as though they held verses of my erased chapters, hidden behind dust. I heard Dad's voice, not loud but steady, reminding me he believed in me. I said it to the letter. I see now. I picked up my phone and dialed Keisha at the law firm. Silence. Her tired voice answered. I told her I needed everything she could find about my father's estate files. She hesitated, but confirmed she remembered a sealed will. It was under lock and key, locked unless challenged. My panic sharpened into focus. There was no rush to shout. I'd gather proof, build a case. I started assembling documents, copies, emails, blurred receipts, old invoices, building a timeline. I listened for squeaks in floorboards, taps of footsteps. The house no longer felt safe for secrets. I whispered to myself, "You can't burn what has already walked through fire." That phrase burned in my mind. My silence would no longer protect me. It would become evidence. I sat by the fire, the letter splayed open on my lap, pen in hand, ready to map dates and events. Mist rolled across the windows, swallowing light. A creak of floorboards. I froze. From the hallway came Revel's voice, soft yet venomous. "If she finds the letter, we're finished." I held my breath, waiting for the future to arrive. I woke up to the same rain tapping against the windows. The guest house was still, but something felt off. I reached for my phone, checked the banking app, and froze. Every account, locked. Transfers blocked. Balances showing zeros like someone had cleaned the slate with a wet rag. For a second, I thought it was a glitch. But no, this wasn't some system error. This was Lorraine. I called my financial advisor. He sounded half awake, confused, then cautious. "It's legal," he said. "It was part of your parents' asset management clause. As executor, she has authority." Authority. That word hit like cold water. Dad once told me, over a game of chess, power hides behind paper, and it doesn't need to raise its voice. Now I understood what he meant. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at the screen, the little loading icon spinning like a taunt. I texted Revel one line. "You and Mom are running scared. Good." She didn't reply, but I knew she'd read it. By midday, I was standing in the doorway of the estate's main study. Same walls, same polished floors. Nothing changed, except me. Lorraine sat by the window, her hand gently swirling iced tea like we were catching up over brunch. Revel leaned against the bookcase, arms crossed, smirking, like she'd rehearsed this moment. I didn't waste breath. You froze my accounts. Lorraine looked up, not surprised. We had to make decisions quickly, Tess. You've always been impulsive. And apparently, broke, Revel added, sipping from her straw like it was a cocktail hour. My chest tightened. Lorraine's voice stayed smooth. You were never going to manage money, Tess. Let's be honest. You're good at spending it. Then the dagger. You just write checks. Let the grown-ups handle the real work. The room tilted. But I kept my balance. I leaned in. Quiet. Steady. You'd be wrong to bet against me. And that's when I heard it. The subtle shift behind the hallway door. Someone else was listening. A house guest, maybe more than one. Eyes on me now. They wanted a scene. I gave them silence. I turned and walked out without a word. Back in the guest house, I was on fire. But it wasn't rage anymore. It was fuel. I opened my laptop, pulled up financial files I'd saved weeks ago. I scrolled through PDF after PDF until something clicked. A trail of management fees paid to a company I'd never seen. A quick search tied the company back to a firm Lorraine once mentioned in passing. Front company. Quiet drain. Then I remembered. Revel, years ago, bragging over wine how easy it was to redirect little things when no one's looking. They weren't freezing me by mistake. They were starving me out. One cut at a time. This wasn't panic. This was strategy. I whispered it to myself. They're trying to bleed me before I even throw a punch. And now, I was done playing defense. I called Keisha. She remembered me instantly. I asked about an injunction to unfreeze the accounts. She said it'd be hard, but not impossible. I texted Petra. That USB, check everything. Let's find what they hoped we wouldn't. Then I drafted a letter to the local paper. The headline I typed wasn't subtle. Daughter evicted over family inheritance dispute. Petra would understand what to do with it if I went dark. I reached out to Vanessa, my friend from college. She'd gone into media. If anything happens, I told her, you go live. No filters. No edits. She paused, then said, just say when. I stared at the necklace Dad gave me, lying on the nightstand. For a second, I almost put it back on. But instead, I left it there. Some things should wait. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. My mind kept clicking through steps, strategies, moves. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was documentation, exposure, truth. At dawn, I picked up my phone again, just to check. There it was. A push alert from the bank, large transfer initiated, but not by me, from my frozen account into Revel's trust fund. I stared at the number, not because of the amount, but because of what it meant. They weren't just shutting me out, they were digging a tunnel beneath me. And I just realized who holds the shovels. The greenhouse always smelled like earth and lemon balm when Dad was alive. Now it smelled like dust and sun-baked glass. I walked there mid-afternoon, needing space to think. It was his retreat, a place of order and quiet. But the benches were covered with dry leaves, the irrigation hoses cracked. Like everything else, it had been left to rot once he was gone. Petra appeared from the back door, wiping her hands on her apron, carrying a stack of invoices. She handed them to me wordlessly. One slip of paper on top showed a payment I'd made 3 years ago to cover one of Revel's debts. Petra glanced at me and whispered, "You were always the one who cleaned up after them." Her voice had that tired kindness only someone who'd seen everything could carry. I stared at the paper and felt my chest tighten. All those years, all that loyalty, for what? My thumb hovered over my phone screen. I typed, "Back off. You've gone too far." Then I deleted it. My hand was trembling, but not from fear, from holding back. I left the greenhouse an hour later, sunlight bouncing off the pool. Revel was lounging there, sunglasses on, scrolling her phone as if she were waiting for me. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me sweat. I walked up, each word chosen like a blade. If you take one more thing that belongs to me, I will not stay silent anymore." My voice was low, but it carried. She tilted her head, smirked. "I thought you already left," she said, like a child poking at an animal to see if it would move. I didn't flinch. I turned and walked away, my heart hammering. Inside my head, I heard myself. Sometimes you don't have to yell to start a war. As I passed the office door, I left a note with the old accountant who still handled some estate paperwork, just a name and a date, a marker, in case I needed it. That night, the house lit up for a family dinner. I hadn't been invited, but the neighbor texted me. Cars lined up, a few local journalists in attendance. I should have stayed away. Instead, I walked across the lawn and through the back door as Lorraine raised a toast. Revel stood beside her wearing my mother's necklace, the one Dad had promised me when I turned 40. "This is a celebration of family we can count on," Lorraine said. The guests laughed politely. Revel's eyes locked with mine, gleaming like polished stones. Pure provocation. I gripped the back of a chair, fingers digging into the wood. My pulse was loud in my ears. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I stepped forward. Slow. Measured. I reached up and unclasped the necklace from Revel's throat without asking. The room went silent, forks suspended mid-air. No one moved. "This was never yours to wear," I said, voice steady. Lorraine opened her mouth, but I raised a hand without looking at her. "You froze my accounts. You stole my home. You think you've broken me?" My voice cracked once, but I steadied it. "You didn't win. You only taught me where to aim." I slipped the necklace into my pocket and walked out. My legs were shaking, but not from shame. It was the first time I'd felt my own spine in years. I got back to the guest house close to midnight. The door was ajar. Nothing was missing, but every drawer was open. Clothes and papers shifted just enough to show someone had been there. On the kitchen counter, a single note. "Don't make this worse." I held it between my fingers. It didn't scare me. It confirmed everything. I used to think silence protected me. Now, it's the only thing they fear. I woke before dawn. The guest house was colder than usual, and when I tried the front door, I realized the locks had been changed again overnight. No note, no sound, just a new metal gleaming in place of the old. It was their way of saying, "We still control this place." I didn't wait for breakfast. I grabbed my bag, slid the eviction notice from last week inside, and drove to the public library down the road. The same quiet tables where I'd done my school essays now became my war room. I opened my laptop, started documenting every intrusion, every frozen account, every insult. As I typed, a courier approached with an envelope. Inside was another eviction notice. This one official, signed by Lorraine's lawyers. My hands trembled, but it wasn't fear. It was insult, pure and sharp. I called Marin, my old mentor, and told her everything. She listened, then said, "Stop thinking like a daughter. Start thinking like a strategist." I closed my eyes after she hung up and felt the first real seed of counterattack take root. By mid-afternoon, I returned to the estate to retrieve more files. Revel was waiting at the driveway, arms folded, a predator in designer sunglasses. She shifted just enough to block my path. "Still pretending this is your home?" she asked. Her voice dripped mockery. I inhaled slowly, every word inside me like a weight. "I filed my notice today," I said. "This isn't over, and more is coming." Her eyebrows lifted. She pulled out her phone, camera on, and pushed it into my face. "Say that again. Threaten me one more time," she sneered, already hitting record. I turned and walked past her, silent, steady. Hours later, her video was online, cut and captioned, "Unstable sister threatens us." I stared at it on my phone. Internal monologue. They want to push me until I become what they accuse me of. I put the phone down. I wouldn't give them that. At 4, I met Silas at a cafe on the edge of town. He'd been my father's friend and had survived his own inheritance war. He slid a folder across the table. "Estate transaction records," he said quietly. "Your name should have been on these accounts." Inside were backdated invoices under Ravel's name, siphoning funds meant for my education. Proof. Real proof. Petra, when I told her, only nodded once and whispered, "I always knew." That evening, I installed a small camera inside the guest house near the desk. Hours later, while I was gone, Lorraine came in. She rifled through my papers, muttering, "She doesn't have the guts to fight us." When I watched the footage, I smiled for the first time in days. "You just gave me everything I needed," I whispered. The next morning, I mailed a package to Lorraine and Revel. Inside was a copy of the footage and a short letter. "You underestimated me." That's your first mistake. In town, I walked into the lawyer's office and opened a defamation and harassment case. No speeches, no drama, just signatures. By afternoon, a small piece about my eviction appeared in the local paper. Neighbors started messaging support, even the ones who'd ignored me for years. For the first time, Lorraine didn't respond to my text. I wrote in my journal that night, "Power doesn't shout, it gathers." As I was about to sleep, my phone buzzed. An anonymous message glowed on the screen. "You think this is over? The worst is coming." I stood still in the dark. A shadow passed my window, long and deliberate. I called the police. They came, found tire marks near the woods behind the estate, then left. I locked every door, every window, heart steady. They had always played dirty. But I was finally learning how to get my hands clean and still win. I met Marin and Silas in Dad's old garden just as the light was softening. The air smelled of wet grass and old roses. We sat on a wrought iron bench, going over the footage we had, Lorraine whispering, invoices, Revel's necklace scene. Marin traced her finger over the screen. "We'll time this for tomorrow's gala," she said. "Quiet, precise, one reveal you can't deny." Silas nodded, his face drawn. He told me he'd lined up a reporter to be on standby. The plan was clean, not a scream, not a spectacle. My voice rested in my chest as I said, "I won't beg, I will expose." Marin's eyes flashed. She warned me, "Once you hit back, they'll hit harder." I puffed a breath but held my stance. Silence stretched across the garden as the sun dipped behind the trees. I felt that tension, the kind before a storm. I walked past the shuttered guest house later, its windows dark, curtains drawn. Revel sat on the front porch, solitary, watching me. She leaned forward. "You think you can embarrass us? Go ahead," she said. I didn't stop. I let myself roll past with a faint half-smile. I wasn't going to dance to her tune. Inside the house, I changed into a white dress. Simple, clean, sharp. It felt like armor and clarity both. I sat at the vanity mirror and wrote a note on a card. "I give you this moment. Use it wisely." I paused, reading it over, then tucked it into my purse. The house felt heavy, every creak like a promise. I could feel all eyes waiting. Later that evening, I entered the ballroom unannounced. The chandelier was lit, people clustered, voices murmuring. I made my way to the microphone stand as cameras clicked. The room stilled. I cleared my throat. "The man I called father left instructions you never saw." I pressed play. The footage unfolded. Lorraine's whisper about me, Revel's hand with my heirloom necklace, those backdated invoices. Guests gasped. Conversations died. I lowered my eyes, then looked up. "This is your first and last warning." Silence bent across the room. Revel clutched her throat. Lorraine's face drained. I stepped back and watched the shock take hold. Guests shifted, whispers rushing like wind. Lorraine opened her lips, but I raised one hand. Revel's phone rang. The live stream had begun broadcasting my reveal across social media. I watched her lips part, flustered. Without pausing, I walked off stage, leaving the room to tremble. In that moment, I heard my own heartbeat. Calm, strong. They would think twice now. I slipped out through the back door, slipstreaming into night. The gasps followed me under the eaves. They will rethink every move before crossing me again. At home, my phone buzzed. A secure message arrived. "We have proof you forged everything. Filing tomorrow." I stared at the screen as alarm blared inside me. A shadow passed outside the window. My chest tightened. They wanted me to break. Instead, I broke their silence. The ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers as I slipped in wearing white. Conversations flickered, glasses clinked, and strangers turned when I passed. The room felt electric, expectant. Lorraine stood at the dais, raising her glass. Tonight we celebrate unity, legacy, and a new era under Revel's leadership. Her voice was warm, practiced. She looked out at faces shining back at her, but that light didn't touch me. I watched the crowd shift, eyes flicking toward me as whispers began. Is she back? Revel's fingers tightened around my mother's necklace around her neck. Someone near me murmured, "Why is she here?" Silas and Marin flanked me, silent sentinels. All the proof, all the evidence, waiting to be unveiled. Just as Lorraine lifted her glass, I stepped forward. The hush dropped like a curtain. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, voice steady, "there is another will, one you've never seen." Cameras swiveled. They stopped mid-clink. Silas emerged holding a green folder with the embossed seal. He handed it to me. I opened it and read aloud. Will number 2. Dad's legal instrument that names me as primary heir with explicit clauses limiting Lorraine's interference. Gasps erupted. Flashes popped. I looked straight at Mother. Her face drained, her smile collapsing. I continued. Zeke's name was inserted unlawfully in my stead. Revel gasped, her wineglass trembling in her hand. Her phone lit up. A social post flashed across screens. Revel's shady use of Tessa's identity exposed. Lorraine stood, lips trembling. "This document is bogus," she hissed. The room cracked. I held up a sealed envelope. My father recorded a final letter. A witness signed it. This isn't fiction. I motioned to Petra, who stepped forward. She said firmly, "I saw her discard the original will." Revel's jaw quivered. Some guests stood, shifting their weight. Others stared, mouths open. The air tasted of betrayal. "The truth isn't loud," I said, "but it's final." Whispers became roars in the margins. I closed the folder. Silence stretched for a breath. Some walked toward me. Some turned back. Loyalties trembled. Lorraine's inner circle confronted her. A cousin stepped forward, demanding explanation. Revel, voice shaky, spat words I knew were rehearsed. Outside the doors, whispers spread. Did she fake it? What about the bank trails? I stood, tense but composed. This night would define us. I sent Lorraine one final message. You had your chance. This time it's justice. I moved toward the veranda, letting the night wind clear my mind. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I held. As guests filtered out, I saw Lorraine slipping away with Revel under flickering lights. I caught her whisper, "This isn't over, Tess. Just round 1. Then darkness swallowed the estate. The lights blinked out. Screams and murmurs rippled. In the blackout, I felt the roar of possibility. They thought they'd extinguish me, but I burned brighter in the dark. The night after the blackout stretched long. Guests scattered like startled birds, their laughter gone, only mutters and phone screens glowing in the dark. I slipped out onto the veranda, breathing in air heavy with wine and sweat. Inside, Revel was cornered by cousins, her charm fraying. In the shadows, I caught my mother's voice quivering as she spoke to Gideon Hill, the family's oldest advisor. I didn't want to be the villain. For a moment, the old days flickered. Dad's hand on my shoulder, the library's scent of cedar, her laugh before it turned into calculation. I touched the silver necklace at my throat. The anchor. It felt heavier now, as if carrying every unspoken word between us. Lorraine stumbled onto the veranda a few minutes later, pale as the marble columns, hands trembling. I tried to protect the family legacy, she said, eyes down. She swayed. For a second, I steadied her, not out of affection, but recognition. Revel lunged forward, but I raised a hand. Let her speak her truth. She sank to one knee, tears carving down her face. My chest tightened. This was the woman who froze my accounts, who rewrote my life. Yet here she was, undone by her own moves. I bent down, close enough to smell the perfume she wore when I was a child, deciding whether to help her stand or leave her there. By dawn, the estate had transformed. News vans lined the road. Reporters leaned over the gates. Someone had posted a shaky video online. Inheritance uproar in Napa Valley. Heir takes over. Legal papers slid under the office doors before breakfast. Revel's name turned to mud across social feeds. Messages poured into my phone from people I hadn't heard from in years. "We're with you." Finally, the truth. Silas called at sunrise. "It's done," he said. "The second will is recognized. Her lawyers can't block it anymore." I stood at the garden bridge, the vines my father planted curling around the rail. Morning light cut through the fog. It felt like the first real breath in months. I called Petra. "Thank you for keeping faith," I said. Then I packed a small bag, Dad's photo, the letters, the necklace, nothing else. I walked to Lorraine's bedroom door, hand hovering above the wood. I didn't knock. I wasn't here to gloat or plead. I whispered to myself, "I'm not here to dethrone. I'm here to reclaim." Then I stepped back, crossed the hall, and walked out through the front gate. Suitcase in hand, I felt the gravel under my shoes, solid and final. The sun rose over the Napa hills as I drove away. In the rearview mirror, Lorraine stood in the doorway, small, defeated, but still upright. Her silhouette shrank until it blurred into the house. I gripped the wheel. I left the house, but not the memory, and that is power they can never take. The road opened ahead, lined with trees. I knew the scandals weren't over, but something had shifted. This wasn't the end of Scandal, but it was the beginning of my story.